Chapter 1 Hoth. The object hit the planet's atmosphere at an incredible speed, engulfed by dazzling heat as it rocketed towards the surface of the world. Seconds later, it entered the stratosphere and plumed at an arch as chunks of its debris were stripped from the friction and sent hurtling back to be burned up. This in turn left behind a glaring red trail in its wake, like the launch of a rocket. Then within 5 seconds it hit the surface with a loud boom that shook the ground in its power. Great waves of snow and ice were sent hurtling up nearly 6 feet into the air in a splatter pattern as the immediate layer of the frostbitten ground melted and gave in to cushion the space object. From a distance of about 3 miles away, a single human rider had noticed the massive explosion. Instinctually, he reined in his massive tauntaun and drew his high-powered binoculars. It took him a second or two to adjust to the proper calibration, but when he did, he saw the great plumes of steam and smoke rising from the crater. Another meteor, he thought to himself. Yet something gnawed at his gut about this particular crater. No, there was something different about this one.
But what?
He didn't know if it was the instinct that made him wonder, or if it was the Force. He knew that part of his life had become stronger under the constant tutelage of his master, but he wasn't sure. Promptly, he raised his wrist communicator and dialed the response.
Echo 3 to Echo 7. Hanobite, do you read me?
A second later, the comm responded.
Loud and clear, kid. What's up?
I finished up my sweep, but a meteor just hit the ground here.
Kid, you worry too much. Meteors hit this place all the time.
I know, but there's something odd about it.
You sense something, kid?
It wasn't a secret that he had been receiving training from the Tragutan commander, that he was apparently growing stronger every day in the ways of the Force. The rumors had every possible story from every possible thing Luke was capable of doing, ranging from being able to make the planet shake to throwing fire from his hands. On the other side of the conversation, Han Solo shook his head. All nonsense, he knew. A time ago he never believed in the mythical powers of the Force, but his adventures of Luke and his teachings of Ahsoka Tano had shaken it. Finally, any shred of disbelief had been dashed aside when not 2 days prior he had bared witness to a spectacular sight. He had just entered the hangar looking for Luke when suddenly the snow spear just in front of him started to rise from the ground completely of its own free will. It hobbled shakily in midair as it started to move across the room. But there, in the center of the hangar, was his young friend sitting in meditative position, with his hand tracking the levitating speeder. Just behind him was the orange-skinned alien, who he had started to take a liking to, with her hand rested firmly on his shoulder, guiding him through the trial. Luke strained with heavy concentration. Massive pores of sweat ran down his body as though he was running a marathon. His eyes were closed shut as he moved the 18-ton aircraft up and over the rafters before at last setting it down onto its loading clamps. After the clamps locked on with a loud hiss, Luke collapsed onto the floor, utterly exhausted as the Tragutan Jedi aided him to his feet. Later, she had told Han that his own face had been worth 1,000 starships. He had already trusted Luke's instincts. Now, he knew he had to trust his senses.
You need any backup, kid?
Nah, don't worry. I'll be alright.
Alright, well the sensors are up, so I'm heading back.
I won't be long.
As the comm went out, Luke swiveled in his saddle to get a better position when suddenly his mount started to scream.
Easy, girl. What?
Then he felt it. Quickly, he went for his blaster and had it drawn when it was upon him. In the white backdrop, it must have been stalking him for several minutes, finally pouncing when the human dropped his guard. The beast was massive, towering over both rider and mount like a wrathful titan as it attacked. Luke managed to get one shot off, aimed right for the center mass. It only stalled the creature for a mere second before its massive claw hand slanted him off the tauntaun and onto the ground. Then it struck the tauntaun on the side of the neck. The blow broke its neck in two, dropping her right next to its unconscious master. Ahsoka Tano suddenly felt a shock that hit her like a thunderbolt to the chest. It hit her so fast she couldn't understand its origin or its matter. With effort, she reached into the Force, hoping to find where the feeling had come from. In the end, she felt nothing save for a constant sea of emptiness. She shook her head and readjusted her flash goggles over her eyes. It was Chewbacca. He was seated over on the number 2 engine port, repairing the fuse line in the ion shaft.
I'm okay, Chewie.
She replied, looking up at him with a warm smile.
Don't worry about me. Worry about the fuse line about to burn your coat.
Suddenly, a section of the fuse line erupted momentarily and blew up a shower of sparks that set fire to Chewbacca's leg. He shot from the Y-wing and batted madly at the singed fur. What he didn't know was the levitating bucket of wire hovering right over his head. A little push later, and the Wookiee was completely drenched in cold water. Chewbacca clenched his fist as the ice-cold water worked its way down his body like a coiling snake, a growl growing on his face as Smart About faced. At the sight of the rageous Wookiee, Ahsoka burst out laughing. For several seconds, Chewbacca glowered at her. Then, he found the laughter contagious. She then lifted a long coat from a nearby locker to hand.
I'm sorry, Chewie. Here, dry off.
She then tossed the cloak over to him, who caught it deftly with one hand. He took one look at her, and then suddenly erupted a violent shake that threw the moisture into 1,000 directions like a bomb. But most hit their mark right on the orange-skinned commander.
You giant walking carpet!
She laughed as she wiped water from her eyes.
I didn't mean to dry off that way. I had nothing to do with singeing your leg. Oh, I'm gonna get you back for that.
She cursed darkly.
And that's a promise.
In response, he feigned shock and fear mockingly. She shook her head in despair.
Enough of your fun and games, you mophead.
She turned her head back to the forward stabilizer and reset the plasma cutter to a low fuse.
After you're done with the fuse line, I still need to run a diagnostics on the Y-Wing's preliminary systems. Don't worry, Chewie. We'll be done by the time Han gets back. Well, if I have some time, sure. Granted, after what the Falcon's gone through, I think she'll need more than just 2 of us to get her back in working order. Did I say I wouldn't help?
She applied the high-heat beam to the bolts surrounding the repair stabilizer. All around the ship were signs of many campaigns in the line of duty. The vessel was a battered, second-hand bomber that had taken more blaster burns than she'd been built for. Even worse, she was one of the oldest warships in the whole of the Rebellion. It'd been built for another war a lifetime ago, and had spent a large majority of the past 2 decades mothballed in storage. By all accounts, this Y-Wing was better suited for scrap, but then most didn't understand the fighter bomber's history. It has served in more battles than most, and then brought down some of the most feared battle cruisers in 2 wars. It has saved countless lives in some of the greatest star battles in living memory, including its own pilot more than once. She spent many years trying to recover it, and had only done so barely a year prior. She would be damned if it was going to go anywhere but into a fight.
Alright, let me run the diagnostics then.
She fused the last bolt into place, then slid into the cockpit. She hit the starter switch and started the power lines up. After a few seconds, the command board came online. She then pulled out a manual checklist and began signing off functional systems. Once this was done, she then ran a systems diagnosis to see if the Y-Wing would be shipworthy. While this was going on, Chewbacca sealed the panel over engine number 2 and headed to the front.
Systems look nominal.
She then depressed an onboard computer.
Graph sets are 5x5. Alright, that looks fine. Let's check the vertical takeoff. Hang on.
She then hit a panel button on her joystick, and the Y-Wing rose from the ground like a reaper in a graveyard. hovering over the ground a solid 6 feet. She had this smile at that. In the basic tongue, the Wookiee had shouted, "Eureka!" She ran one last test on the comm systems before, at last, setting down. She then popped open the cockpit and firmly embraced the Wookiee, who returned to the feeling warmly.
Thanks for the help. Now if you...
Chewie, what the hell is this?
Tragudin and Wookiee both turned to see Han staring up at them, his face basked in utter annoyance.
I thought you were working on the Falcon, you fuzzball. Do you want to end up a permanent resident?
Han!
Ahsoka stepped forward, her hand raised in a calming gesture.
It was my fault. I asked Chewie to give me a hand with the Y-Wing.
That thing?
Han scoffed, gesturing a finger at the fighter bomber.
That relic is more suited for a damn scrapyard. And you, Chewie? We've got a bounty on our heads, remember? It's a bounty on Ormondel, not enough incentive for us to get going?
Han!
Ahsoka suddenly exclaimed, drawing his attention to her.
I told you it was my fault. And as far as my Y-Wing being junk, I could say the same about the Falcon.
Han was stunned, and so was Chewbacca. To them, the Millennium Falcon wasn't a ship. It wasn't just some ordinary inanimate piece of junked metal assembled around an explosive core that more than likely was going to give out on them than work. No. She was their home. In grief or in poverty, they at least had her, a place to call home. Ahsoka knew as much. She knew what the Falcon was to them. It was the very same sentimental value she'd put in the very same craft that they were standing on. It was hers, yes, but it had also been her former master's, her friend, her brother in many sense. Now, it was the only thing she had left that she could even remotely remind her of what she had lost, the good she had once known. As she thought, she peered into the mind of Han Solo, not in a bluntly obtrusive way, but in a gentle, subtle means. You wouldn't even know that his very same thoughts were being seen in fragments by the former Jedi. Within, she saw the Falcon. She saw the many happy memories Han had of her, of being on board with Chewie and Luke. Despite his appearance, Han wasn't truly a scoundrel. Han wanted what any other man who's never had much wanted. Happiness. But not in a materialistic meaning, not really. Chewie was his closest friend. Luke, something of a younger, innocent brother. Looking deeper, she saw a conversation between the two of them. It was just 4 years ago, prior to the destruction of the Death Star. Luke had cursed Han for leaving, saying he had only been in it for the money. She could feel Han's emotions in this moment. Yeah, he'd been in it for the money at first, and he had seen the kid as just another farm boy. But in that moment, he had seen something different in Luke. Han had been beaten down and had been broke enough times that he simply lost any shred of hope. Yet, here was this boy, this farm kid, who had come from nothing, who refused to back down to anyone and was willing to get himself killed for people he didn't even know. All because he believed it was the right thing. It was inspiring to Han. It unlocked a part of him that he thought he'd lost forever. That was why, she knew, he'd come back on the Death Star, why he had stuck around for so long. But now, he had to balance what was right and what he needed to do for himself. On the other end of the mental spectrum, Han knew something was off, and he knew what it was.
Like what you see?
He asked with a grin. Ahsoka glared at him in annoyance.
You're not my type, Solo.
You have a type?
That did it. She had had enough. She jumped from the craft and began to storm off. In that moment, Han felt an overwhelming sense of guilt over something he knew to be utterly stupid. Quickly, he called out to her.
Wait, Ahsoka, wait!
She stopped in her tracks and about-faced, staring at him with cold eyes. He in turn couldn't match the intensity of her glare. He bowed his head and sighed.
Look, I'm sorry, it's just...
His eyes darted back to the Falcon, parked on the other side of the hangar, beautiful in her mismatched, battered state.
Is all I got. Alright. All we got. She's the only thing I've got that can call home.
And with that, Ahsoka Tano's heart melted, and she could only sigh.
I know. I felt your connection to the Falcon.
That's what you saw?
Among other things. Luke, for example.
Yeah, well,
He turned his head, slightly bemused as he gripped the back of it with his free hand, his eyes moving over to where Skywalker's X-Wing lay.
nothing can keep him down for long. What you doing for him?
Yes?
I think it's good for him. I never put much faith in the Force, but after seeing what he can do, I can't judge something like that, so I guess, thanks.
She smiled at that, and Han couldn't help but smile back. Then he grinned at her.
Just do me a favor and don't go poking around in my head, okay?
Sorry. I do it without thinking sometimes.
Yeah, well, put a leash around me then. There are things in there you probably don't want to see.
I have no doubt. Hey, listen. I offered Chewie I'd help with the Falcon.
Thanks. Maybe with 3 pairs of hands we might be able to get her back to working order again.
Hey, by the way, where is Luke anyway?
Oh, he went to go check out a meteorite. Probably back in a bit. Why?
She sighed deeply and closed her eyes, her thoughts turning inward.
Just something I need to tell him.
The Lambda-class 24A shuttle touched down in the hangar amid the clamor of alarms, ship personnel clearing away the landing space, and soldiers quickly moving into formation in neat, orderly columns. As the shuttle landed, the primary doors to the hangar opened with a loud zing, and Darth Vader stepped through, flanked by Brigadier General Maximilian Veers and Captain Firmus Piet, as well as a cadre of veteran stormtroopers. The cabal of senior officials marched their way down the landing platform path towards the shuttle. When they arrived at the ritualistic 20-foot distance, the ramp to the shuttle unclamped and began to descend with a loud hiss. As the ramp descended, a dark, foreboding figure approached.
Star Killer.
The figure responded, his voice metallic and synchronized to something akin to a growl.
Lord Vader.
Quickly, the figure dropped to one knee and bowed his head before his superior, and in many ways, his master.
Rise, assassin.
The man before them was a terrifying sight. Both Piet and Veers were veteran commanders, yet what they saw truly made them shudder in genuine fear. The man was clad in black, overlaying quilted robes under a series of dull gray armored plates that covered over his chest in a V pattern. Yet above that was the mask. To Piet's eyes, it looked like a cross between an Ubia's bounty hunter mask and that of a Mandalorian. It was sleek and form-fitting, like the bare resemblance of a gaunt skull that angled slightly inward just behind the eyes. In the front was a sharp T-handled visor pointed at each end. Below that was a kind of grilled breath respirator that formed like the maw of some monstrous creature. This was Galen Marek, better known by his title, Star Killer, one of the most notorious of the Sith Inquisitors. These were Force-sensitive assassins who answered to Vader and the Emperor alone, and were greatly feared by many in the Empire for their brutality and utter disregard for any who got in their way, Imperial soldiers included. Veer's sharp eyes quickly caught something else as well. Located on his belt was of course a lightsaber, except it wasn't the only one. There were 3 others, and these had the robust look of a Jedi.
I see you've regained your strength, Galen.
Vader spoke with the slightest sense of sympathy. It's now moving about his students' new armor.
And gained a new appearance.
Of course, Lord Vader.
Starkiller replied, his voice submissive in respect for Vader.
The damage sustained to me by the apprentice have been repaired.
Vader stared into the visor of his greatest student, all too aware of the likeness of the war helmet to his own, the angular positions of the face, and the overall god appearance made that all too clear. A part of Vader felt offended by this mockery, but the other part of him rejoiced at it. While he had always known where the assassin's loyalties lay, this attempt at appeasement only confirmed it.
Good. We have much to do. General Veers, Captain Bietz,
My lord?
we will discuss the nature of the assassin's mission in my chambers. Ensure I am not disturbed.
Without a second word, the two Sith departed from the hangar and made their way into the very heart of the Executor. When they were sure the two were a long ways away, General Veers called out to the soldiers standing at attention. "Company, dismissed!" Instinctually, the men stepped back from the sound of 100 boots stepping together as one and roared, "Aye aye, sir, and General, sir!" and performed an all-about face to return to previous duties. As the company dispersed, Veers eyed Piet, and Piet returned the look. "Why would they send an Inquisitor? Especially that monster?" Veers inquired, sounding off both of their fearful questions.
Only one thing. The Jedi.
Skywalker?
No doubts, General. Vader has been on his trail ever since he learned his identity years ago.
May the Force pity them when those two find them.
Pity them? Pity everybody even in the system when that happens.
The hydraulic doors opened with an effort. A moment later, the two Sith entered the private quarters of Darth Vader. When the doors closed, Vader spun on his heel and stared down at his most trusted lieutenant.
What is thy bidding, my master?
Starkiller asked with a respectful, obedient tone. For several seconds, Vader continued to stare at the Inquisitor until, finally, he turned once again to peer into the open maw of his hyperbaric chamber.
Tell me, my apprentice, what is the objective of your mission, truthfully?
Starkiller replied without a second thought or hesitation.
To aid in the capture, or if the situation requires, elimination of the apprentice and Skywalker. And should you be unwilling or unable to carry out such orders, I am to carry them out myself in your stead, forcibly, I might add.
And what are your true intentions?
To carry out as thy bids, my master.
With this, Vader turned back to Starkiller.
Good. In due time, we will discover the whereabouts of the rebels, and in turn, the Jedi.
I look forward to encountering her again.
Starkiller's death-like mask turned toward his chest, to the many surgical scars buried beneath quilt and plasteel armor.
She will find me better prepared for her tricks this time.
Her life is not for yours to take.
Vader suddenly snapped angrily, causing Starkiller to shift his attention to Vader once again.
Nor is she to be slain during this endeavor.
My master, I understand the needed acquisition of Skywalker. He is still young in the Force, but the apprentice is
An asset. One that if turned would benefit us greatly. The Emperor, however, must not be known to her survival.
I understand, my master.
Good. Now, show me what you have learned.